We start with the Liberal Caucus unrest that is poised to move to the next stage tomorrow morning, when the Prime Minister meets Liberal MPs in person. Some MPs want Justin Trudeau to step down, and they're going to make that request face-to-face at tomorrow's caucus meeting. Ken McDonald is one of the MPs planning to ask the Prime Minister to resign, and he joins me now. Ken McDonald, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Yes, you as well.
People would not be surprised to see you as part of this effort to have the Prime Minister leave. What is your understanding of how this is supposed to roll out tomorrow in caucus?
Not completely sure. I think somebody will introduce it to the Prime Minister and probably give him the sheet and probably give a bit of a talk on it, I would think. I haven't heard any more on it than that. It's all kind of hush-hush until it actually happens, so
right.
We'll see what happens tomorrow. And the thing about it is, of course, what happens in caucus stays in caucus. I'd be very surprised if anybody comes out of that meeting and talks to reporters or anything about what was said or what was done.
Well, what happens in caucus stays in caucus in theory, Ken McDonald,
yes.
Because as you know, a lot has gotten out. But
yeah.
okay, I want to just put a couple of things down here as clear facts. You have seen the letter, right? It exists, and you have signed the letter.
I have signed the letter, yes.
Okay, when you signed it, this was what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
It was Thursday, a week, it'd be 2 weeks.
So like the 10th of October, right around then, right that way. Okay, when the House was sitting.
Yeah.
And how many signatures were on the letter at the time you signed it? Because there's talk now that there are as many as 30. Ken Hardy said today he knows 18 people who have personally signed the letter.
Yeah.
How many were there when you had signed it?
My signature was on the top of a clean page. Mm-hmm. There were other pages underneath it. I didn't leaf through it to see what was below the page I was signing, so I didn't see any names.
But there were signatures there. You saw, so you just didn't scrutinize
them? There were signatures on the page, underneath the page that I was signing, but
right.
I couldn't pick out who it was or who they were.
Okay, and so what you put your name to, is it as simple as we want Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to step down as Liberal leader?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to be the request that is made to the Prime Minister in caucus tomorrow. I was speaking to someone who's part of this group, because you're all carved up into little pieces where everybody has a piece of it, but nobody knows all of it, is how it seems. Yeah. And I'm told the plan is for one or more MPs to stand up in caucus, to make the request formally to the Prime Minister, but not necessarily to say how many MPs have signed the effort, but not to necessarily give him the full list of the names.
Okay.
Do you know that to be the case?
No,
have you been told that? Do you know anything other than that? Do you have contrary information to that?
No, I don't have any information on how they plan to present it, whether they're going to give them a copy of it or read out the names or just say a number that's on the document. I don't know.
Okay, so we on this program a week or so ago, Sean Casey came out and said that he thinks the Prime Minister should go. He has later confirmed that he has signed the letter, but that was after he made his intentions clear. You've signed it and said it. Wayne Long has signed it and said it. Obviously, it has to be more than that. You and Wayne Long are not running again. How do you think the Prime Minister will respond to it when it seems a lot of the people behind this effort are anonymous, or in your case, not running federally and leaving?
Yeah, well, it's not just about me not running, it's about who's coming behind me to run. And I would hope that the Liberal Party will take notice of what happens tomorrow and do something about it. If the Prime Minister doesn't go, how does he fix it and come to terms with the people who signed that actual document?
But what is the or else? This is what I'm struggling with here, Ken McDonald, because everyone says, you're signing a letter saying we want the Prime Minister to go, but what's the or else? Because that doesn't seem to be clear, even amongst the people who are planning this. Yeah,
and I don't think there's a definite plan. What I think to myself, and I haven't mentioned this to anyone, is that the thing I'd think about is if the Prime Minister doesn't respond in some way to this letter and the signatories that are on it, what happens when the next confidence vote comes before the House of Commons? Are we going to stand and vote with non-confidence, or are we going to stand and vote with the government? So maybe how the Prime Minister responds to this letter tomorrow might give some indication of, okay, are we okay the way we're going, or do we let the Prime Minister continue as is?
Okay, so wait a minute. I mean, for you to say that voting non-confidence is an option, is that something that's been discussed? Is that something you're thinking about?
I've heard it talked about. I haven't brought it up. It's just something that, in my head, that I think could possibly happen.
Talked about how widely? Like one MP, two MPs, multiple? What are we talking about?
Several MPs.
How serious do you think this is, that they might be willing to do this? Because that's the nuclear option.
I think it'll depend on the response from the Prime Minister, whether he responds tomorrow or in the coming days.
Okay, so what, you've made clear, you were one of the first out of the gate, even before all of this happened, when you spoke to my colleague, Laurence Martin from Radio Canada about the carbon tax, and even with the Atlantic carve-out, the home heating oil carve-out, that was pushed by the Atlantic Canadian MPs. You made clear even then that you thought best before date, time to go. Yeah. What do you need to hear from Justin Trudeau tomorrow?
I don't know what we'll hear. But I expect he'll respond to it. Now, in what manner, I don't know. Will he wait for a day or two to respond to it, or will he respond to it right there in Caucus? I don't know. The Prime Minister is, I think, determined to stay on, but many leaders have said that time and time again and got ousted from a leadership position in provincial politics or federal, I guess.
We look at what happened with Aaron O'Toole in the Conservative Party. They signed the Reform Act, so they had a process to trigger a secret ballot process to get rid of the leader. Yeah. We look at what happened with the Stockwell Day with the Canadian Alliance. People went and formed an independent parliamentary caucus. I know you say there's been some loose conversation of if it's a bad response, it could be non-confidence. But you've said you're not going to sit as an independent. Wayne Long said at the Radio Canada. Sean Casey says he still wants to run as a Liberal, even if the Prime Minister stays on. Okay. I mean, that would suggest there isn't...
There's not a...
Is there a lot of guts there to go hard? What do you think?
I think like I just said, I think it'll depend on how the Prime Minister responds tomorrow. And like I said, maybe he won't respond at all. Maybe he'll wait for a couple of days and ask to meet with the people who signed this paper one-on-one, or whether he'll meet with us as a group. So that'll be his opportunity to say what he thinks of what we're trying to do and how he wants to change things going forward.
I just wonder, you are an Atlantic Canadian MP, Sean Casey, Wayne Long, all Atlantic Canadian. We saw people like Serge Cormier, René Arsenault vote against the government on the Bloc's demand to increase old age security. A lot of Atlantic Canada there.
I did too.
Right? Yes, I know. But there's a lot of Atlantic Canada there. Yeah. The Liberals in New Brunswick had a massive win last night. I mean, people are saying Liberals can't win, and Liberals won. Does that give you pause that maybe
I think the Liberals can win, but you just said a term that I've used before, your best before date. And things I hear from constituents, from supporters, non-supporters, is the same as what Mr. Casey is hearing when you interviewed him, that, they say, we like you, but we can't vote for your leader. So it'll come down to every vote when it counts, I guess, at the end of the day, if the Liberals are going to win a majority government in Ottawa, or even a minority government. The last poll I seen wasn't very flattering to the Liberals. It had, I think the Conservatives had something like 225 seats or somewhere in that range. The official opposition would be the Bloc Québécois, and the NDP would be in third place ahead of the Liberals.
Right.
So how far has it fallen since 2015 to see that the Liberals would be the fourth party, not the third, the fourth, if the election were held on that day?
Chrystia Freeland spoke in the last hour, and she said it is her view, like a lot of members of Cabinet have said, that the Prime Minister has the support of the overwhelming majority of Caucus. And she also said that Caucus is king. I wonder what you make of those two comments.
I think he probably does have the support of the overall Caucus, or the majority of them. And if Caucus is king, the Prime Minister will listen to this fraction of Caucus tomorrow and respond accordingly.
But the only way to respond accordingly, in your view, Ken McDonald, is to step down. And Justin Trudeau has given no indication of that. And in fact is showing all the signs that he intends to stay and fight because he's the best person to beat Pierre Poilievre. And that's certainly what you're hearing, like Mark Miller, what he said today. I mean, he called what you guys are doing garbage. I mean, those are fighting words. That's not, maybe you have a point kind of comments.
Yeah. I didn't hear him I didn't hear his response or to a question or anything on that. But to say it's garbage, I think, is probably one of the reasons why people signed the actual document. If that's the attitude of a minister, for caucus members to be concerned about something and call it garbage, that is totally dismissing the whole idea of what we're trying to do.
I go back to the summer, and after you lost the by-election in Toronto St. Paul's, I believe it was George Chahal, the Calgary Skyview MP, who got 9 MPs or 9 other MPs.
8 signatures and his own.
And his own.
For 9.
Right, to have a national in-person caucus meeting to talk about it,
Yeah.
and that was pushed off. Had that meeting happened, could tomorrow's meeting have been avoided?
Totally.
Why?
Because it would have given a chance for, if it was an in-person caucus meeting, everybody, there were a lot of people nervous after that election. I spoke to several colleagues in the Toronto area, and they said the same thing, that we should have an in-person caucus meeting to talk about what went wrong here. To lose a seat that you've held for, I think, some 32 years straight, and to lose it all of a sudden in a by-election, it seems like something has fallen off the rails. And so if you keep going with that, if you're going to have by-elections on the way and you keep losing one, it kind of eats away at your support. And the public will look at that as well in other areas and think, like, are we wrong to be thinking that we should vote Liberal, or is there a chance if we vote Liberal they won't form government?
But you're in a scenario now, Ken McDonald, that you've declared your intentions. Tomorrow we see whatever the move is, and whether you show the full hand that is there to be played, we don't know. But if he doesn't leave and your group doesn't stop, you end up in a situation where it becomes a race to the bottom because of the internal fighting that happens inside your party. Yeah. And this 4th place finish you're worried about, you can manifest that by fighting with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And parties in the past have, well, it's like eating their own kind of thing, is to lose an election because of infighting. But if the Prime Minister responds to the message that we're giving him, and if the Prime Minister meets with us and talks about it and where he wants to go and where he doesn't want to go, that may quell things, may quieten it down. I don't know. But right now it's loud and it's clear what people are asking the Prime Minister.
But is there a plan he can put on the table and say, here's how we're going to win 150 seats, here's how we're going to win 180 seats, and here's how we're going to beat Pierre Poilievre that will convince you?
That plan would have to come from the Prime Minister.
Right, but like if the demand is that he goes, the demand isn't show us a plan or we want you to go. The demand is go. It seems like most of you are past the point where he can say anything that would change your opinion.
And that's probably true as well, right? And as you said, I'm not running again. Yeah. So it doesn't bother me as much as it would bother someone who's looking to run again.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, so just as a couple of final points. 30 names, does that sound right to you? Does that sound high? Does that sound low?
I mean, that sounds about right.
That sounds about right. And but that wasn't there when you had seen it, but we've seen other people join on to it.
Yeah.
What will you take any definitive steps tomorrow if you don't hear what you hope to hear from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his people in caucus tomorrow?
No, I won't take any definitive steps the next day. I'll wait it out and see where it goes. I have said to people that I would look at running provincially, and if that election comes sooner rather than later, I'll be done in Ottawa sooner rather than later.
So you're going to run for Andrew Furey, and the Liberals will at least seek a nomination in that provincial election, which is also due to happen in October of next year, but things are fluid.
or earlier.
Okay. All right. Well, Ken McDonald, Liberal MP for now from Avalon. Thanks for coming in. And I know, look, we're all going to want to talk to you after caucus tomorrow. So you're welcome to come back and we'll have more of a chat.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
No, thank you.
That's Liberal MP Ken McDonald. The confrontation is expected to happen at tomorrow's Liberal caucus meeting, and one of the MPs standing in support of Trudeau is Ottawa Centre MP Yasir Naqvi, who joins me now. Yasir Naqvi, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, David.
You heard what Ken McDonald said there. He raised the idea of non-confidence. I followed up, and he said it's been discussed amongst some of the MPs that depending on how the Prime Minister responds, it might be an option they consider. What's your reaction to that?
Well, look, I'm learning about all these steps and processes through the media, and I've said this before. Nobody has approached me. I will say this: I don't know if this should be our focus right now. Canadians are going through a lot of challenges. We know that there's challenges around building more homes. We need to make sure that affordability is front and center, that Canadians get good health care. Those are the things that we need to focus on. That's what the Prime Minister and the government has been steadfast about, coming with solutions that are starting to pay off as things are getting better every single day. This is a distraction that takes us away from serving Canadians, which is our job number one.
Is it a distraction, though? I mean, like, yes, obviously it's a distraction. But 30 MPs, if that's what it is, prepared to go in there tomorrow, however they do it, because it is all very unclear. I will concede to that. But they are going to stand up, some of them, and say the Prime Minister needs to go, and some of them are publicly talking about pretty severe consequences if he doesn't. So, I mean, how do you want to see your leader respond to this tomorrow? Because Ken McDonald has made it pretty clear it's going to happen.
Well, Caucus is a place that we discuss thorny issues. That is the entire purpose behind Caucus. I think it's good for democracy. So I welcome discussion like this, and we've always had robust discussions in our caucus. I've served provincially as well, and I've been part of some really heated debates on issues around the direction of the leadership. That is all healthy. But in the end of the day, what we cannot afford to do is take our eye away from the key objective that we've been given the privilege to be elected. Me as a member of as a member of Parliament here in Ottawa Centre, or the government, the Liberal government, and that is around ensuring that as we rebuild the economy post-pandemic, that we're creating good jobs for Canadians, that we're bringing inflation down, interest rates are coming down, that we are building a clean environment, that wages are going up. Those are the things that when I'm speaking to my constituents at the door, they raise and they want their government to be focused at.
But Sean Casey says when he speaks to his constituents at the door, they say, I want to vote for you, Sean, but I can't vote for Justin Trudeau anymore. And this is a guy who got elected under Michael Ignatieff saying this is a problem, right? And you know the low point that 2011 was. So he wasn't part of the seeds of whatever is coming tomorrow, but he has joined it. He signed on to it. And it's more than just Atlantic Canadians across the country. I mean, Ken Hardy said today that he knows 18 people in the caucus personally who have signed on to the letter. So how does the Prime Minister respond to it? I know all the issues you say he should be focused on and your government should be focused on, but he needs a caucus if he's going to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's up to the Prime Minister, and I'm looking forward to.
What do you want to see, though? You're a caucus member.
I support Justin Trudeau's leadership. I think he has been a strong and a steadfast leader, someone who has steered our country in the right direction. You know, first we had to deal with the Trump administration and how they wanted to gut the really important relationship between Canada and U.S. Justin Trudeau, under his leadership, renegotiated NAFTA agreement in the best interest of Canada. Then came the pandemic, and look how well we fared out of the pandemic. We not only prevented deaths of Canadians, but we ensured that Canadians lived through the pandemic in the most healthiest way possible. And now, through the policies of Justin Trudeau, we've been rebuilding the economy. We have wrestled the inflation down. The interest rates are coming down. The unemployment rate is down. This is what Justin Trudeau has been able to demonstrate. And what I will urge my colleagues, what Canadians want us to do, is focus on the choice. The choice is Pierre Poilievre, whose politics is dangerous and his policies are reckless. Pierre Poilievre every single day stands up in the House of Commons and talks about cutting programs and that are helping Canadians every single day. That is going to cause a recession in the country and is going to really hurt people.
But you know, you talked about how you've been elected provincially, you've been elected federally, and so you know elections are about the future. And what you talked about is the past. And I'm in no way dismissing the merits of that track record, but Blaine Higgs just ran an election in New Brunswick largely on his record without a big, clear plan for the future, and he lost. And this is, you know, when the Prime Minister was here in June, I asked him, like, what do you need a fourth term for that you couldn't do in the first three? And his answer was about continuing to meet the moment. And so in a change election, nostalgia isn't the answer. So, like, what does he need to put on the table tomorrow to convince these people he is the right guy, and then show to Canadians that he is the right guy despite St. Paul's, LaSalle, and a year of bad polls to turn it around?
So I agree with you. Elections are about the future, and they're also about the choices in front of you. The choice in front of us is Pierre Poilievre as the alternative, who is everybody that I spoke to in my community is going to be really challenging and dangerous for our country in terms of whatever ideas that he is putting forward, which is basically nothing more than slogans right now. We don't know what kind of future he wants to build. We're doing the process of developing a platform. We will put forward a very robust platform that will speak about building a Canada that meets the moment, building a Canada that is going to play an important role not only for Canadians but in the world, as we have always done. But most important thing is to protect the foundation that we have built, upon which we can build that bold and audacious future for our country.
Well, the party needs to find a way to move past this, and the caucus definitely needs to find a way to move past this if you're going to do all of those things. So, you know, if your colleagues stand up in caucus tomorrow, as the intention is, and say he needs to go, how do you hope the caucus meeting ends? Like, what needs to happen in the 2 hours you've set aside to deal with something that's been brewing since over 2 by-elections? What do you need to do? How do you need to end the caucus meeting tomorrow for you to feel better about things?
Well, I have a lot of trust in this caucus. These are colleagues, these are friends. You do become like a family. In every family, there are some challenging times. And you have disagreements as well. But in the end of the day, we all leave the room being one, being as a family. And
Do you think that can happen tomorrow?
I'm really hopeful.
Mark Miller had Fighting Words today, said what they're doing is garbage, and Ken McDonald's pretty upset about that. I mean, do you think you can?
We're all passionate people. We're all passionate people, and we will express our point of view, and we'll have. I am confident that we will have a very healthy debate, but I also want to ensure that caucus confidentiality is maintained, because that's how we all have thoughtful, robust conversation. And in the end of the day, I want to leave the room with the sole objective that I was elected for, which is to serve my constituents and deal with the challenging issues that are before us.
Ontario Liberal MP, the MP for Ottawa Centre, Yasir Naqvi. Depending on what happens tomorrow, we may want you back. I want to thank you for coming in tonight. We always appreciate the time. Thank you, sir. While Justin Trudeau faces some anger and frustration in his caucus, there appears to be no dissent in his cabinet, as ministers voiced unequivocal support this morning for Justin Trudeau as they headed into their weekly meeting.
I'm a member of his cabinet. Obviously, we support him. I think the work that we're trying to do to help Canadians is really the main focus right now.
One of the things I love about my caucus, and it's I was elected 20 years ago to this caucus, is that it's full of opinions, and they're welcome to share them. I haven't seen the letter. I guess they know my opinion on it, so I didn't get a copy of it.
The entire cabinet and myself, for sure, are 100% behind the Prime Minister.
Look, have you seen the letter? I haven't seen the letter. What's this supposed letter? I haven't seen the letter. I've not seen the letter, and I've not signed the letter.
Any minute spent on this garbage is a minute that's not spent on Pierre Poilievre and what he wants to do to this country, and I think that's very dangerous.
We will have a robust debate. We will come out, with, in my view, support for the Prime Minister to move forward with the election.
Every day, we're learning a little bit more about this simmering tension inside Justin Trudeau's caucus, and some of it is contradictory, and the whole thing is a bit confusing. So we brought in Louis Blouin. He's the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Radio Canada. Louis, Ken McDonald just sat right there and said multiple MPs have discussed the possibility of voting non-confidence in government the next time they have that chance if they don't get a good response tomorrow. What is your sense of where this whole thing is right now?
You know what? I think it could get complicated if some MPs are threatening to do that. But how many are they? I think that's the big question for the PM. I think that's a big question for him to be able to know if he's going to be able to contain this tomorrow. Will we have a list of names also? That's I think the big question. Are they MPs who will run again or not? And is there ministers in the list? Maybe we don't know. So I think these are all severity factors that we're going to have to look for tomorrow. But my understanding is that at the PMO, there's a thought that is going around that they think that there's a vast majority of MPs who are supportive of the Prime Minister who will also speak out tomorrow when this meeting caucus, and that could help the Prime Minister and maybe temper the opposition that some MPs could have that they want to express. So I think everything is going to be played in that meeting and how the PM approaches this. And we're hearing that he's in listen mode. So he wants to listen to the MPs, trying to be open, have a frank discussion with them, and try and temper things down.
So a couple of things I've heard today. There were conversations today about how to approach this tomorrow. There's going to be more meetings and stuff tonight, and maybe even the regional caucuses are going to meet before the national caucus tomorrow. The plan, as I understand it right now, is that for one or more of the people involved in this to stand up in caucus and make the demand to the Prime Minister, to his face finally, that they would like him to go. say how many people they have who signed this effort, but not necessarily share the list of names beyond the people who reveal themselves in caucus tomorrow. What does that suggest about how strong this is?
I think if it's the case, it would weaken the position. Even if there's a lot of names, if there's 20 and 30, but people are not even, don't want to show their face in caucus, in a closed meeting.
Right.
That, I think it tells you a lot. We spoke with 3 different MPs today. You spoke with Ken McDonald. We also confirmed with Sean Casey and Wayne Long that they are not planning on going anywhere, quitting caucus, sitting as independent for this if the Prime Minister refuses to go. So that also tells me that the Prime Minister has some margin to work around that tomorrow. And we saw also the ministers come out very strongly today.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting in the dynamics. Will some of them, stand up and try and defend him? I know that there was a long cabinet meeting today. I've heard that every minister was invited to speak his mind. How can we reassure our troops? How can we try to temper down this anxiety? So there's a real consideration out there that they need to do something. They need to present something. I'm hearing that the new National Campaign Director, Andrew Bevan, and his Deputy Director, Marjorie Michel, want soon to do a presentation to caucus to tell them, we heard you. We know it's not has been the best preparation we have in the last few weeks, last few months for the next campaign. But there's something coming. They're going to talk about an online campaign that is coming, also maybe advertising, stuff like that. Because I want to show that there's action happening. There's something happening. A Liberal source told me today, more happened in campaign preparation in the last 2 weeks than in the last year. So it tells you that now there's a sense of urgency that they have to bring something to caucus. Is it too late? That's the big question now.
Okay, so here's a final question I have for you. We've been talking about this for well over a week when news of it first got out, but it's been building, and really tomorrow was supposed to be the start of this because they didn't really want their efforts to get out, the news of it to get out. Do you think tomorrow is potentially the end of this, or do you think tomorrow is really just the beginning of this? Because this is where the demand has been made, and that process starts from the perspective of these plotters. Whether they can hold it together, whether they can, I don't know. But what do you think?
I think if this doesn't happen tomorrow, it's going to be very difficult for them to come back because now we're hearing there's a lot of MPs, and apparently even MP calling PMO saying we're tired of this, we're tired of these maneuvers. So I think they will have really less space to try and do something like this. And it's time running out too. I mean, like if you look at the time left, they cannot start that again in January. I think they knew that their window was now, end of October. There's negotiations going on with the Bloc, with the NDP maybe eventually. There's a crunch going on. But then if you don't do it now, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to come back. And maybe it's a last push that they wanted to express, feel good with themselves to, have spoken their minds. But, after that, I think they would have maybe to just stop it and look forward.
Well, and the risk on the other side, though, is that a lot of people who don't get the change they want might just decide they're not going to run again. And that then becomes another challenge.
Yeah, and there's already a lot of them. More than 30 MPs are just left or decided that they're not running again already.
Yeah, okay. Well, tomorrow's going to be interesting. We'll talk again. That's Radio Canada's Louis Blouin. Okay, that gives us a lot to talk about with the Tuesday Power Panel. Emily Nicolas is a columnist for Le Devoir. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. And Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. Michelle, Ken McDonald is the first person to put the possibility of voting non-confidence on the table as an option being discussed by multiple MPs if they don't like what they hear tomorrow. How serious do you think this whole situation is right now?
Well, first, let me separate this idea that you're going to vote non-confidence, and because it's a strain of logic to follow that through. So you want the Prime Minister to leave, and if he doesn't, you're going to actually trigger an election where the Prime Minister is leading the party. It doesn't really hold water here. So take that separate that out. I think what's going to be interesting tomorrow is, how many caucus members who are running again, right? So who want to be able to put forward their names and actually stand for the party. How many of them have an opinion on this? And it's sounding, from your earlier reporting or what you're hearing, kind of murky that there's going to be a letter, but it's not going to be shared publicly, and it's not going to be shared with the Prime Minister. So the names on it are what? Filing? Like that's kind of confusing. Like how strongly do they feel about this if that's really true? Nevertheless, Priam has to listen tomorrow, and he has to respond, and he needs to put this to bed if they want any kind of chance of pulling it together for the election campaign.
Yeah, Kate, it is, I'm not going to lie, it is very strange, right? Like I know they collected the signatures sort of as a pledge to be part of the effort, and the logic in not showing their full hand tomorrow is, I guess, to avoid being splintered and, as Michelle says, a threat to vote non-confidence. Now, maybe if you're not running again, you can say YOLO, vote no, and go home. I don't know. But it is, I have never quite seen anything like this ever. What do you make of the significance and the strength of what's happening?
Yeah, there's also a few cabinet positions that have recently been made available that I think are likely being dangled over caucus members' head as, support us now and have your chance at being on the front bench sooner rather than later, given the resignations that happened in the last week. I mean, I think the main thing to take away from all of this tension within Liberal caucus is just how incapable the government is of actually pursuing their legislative agenda. That is a major issue for the Prime Minister. He's not able to break away from the drama and the tensions within his own party. And ironically, an inability to craft that vision or put forward a narrative that can inspire caucus to want to continue to stand beside him. He's not able to do that as long as he's dealing with the former. So, I find it a bit of a startling admission from Louis Blouin, or a startling kind of commentary about the fact that, work might not have started on the campaign plan except for 2 weeks ago, or more work is being done now and then in the last year, considering they set the fixed election date. Right. So if you're a member of that caucus, you're not particularly enthused about the plan going forward, or you're not sure what the plan is. I do think that for this to be effective, there needs to be demonstration on the ground, actually doing the work to show the Prime Minister that you're not going to either fundraise for him or there's going to be issues organizing on the ground. Absent that, this is a lot of gossip in the hallways as opposed to something that could have a real impact, but it does impact the Prime Minister's ability to continue to govern in an effective way. Well,
Francoise, it can all be corrosive. It can all be destabilizing. There is a real lack of trust inside the Liberal caucus because of the way this has all been compartmentalized and people not knowing who is loyal to who and this sort of thing, and our cabinet minister's part of it. It's a pretty untenable situation. I mean, how do you think this needs to play out tomorrow for the Liberals to get resolution on this, and can they get resolution on it tomorrow?
Well, I do hope that the Prime Minister will let some of those people, like probably Sean Casey, who's had the guts from the get-go to talk, even without having signed the paper at the time, to come to the mic, because he's got valid points. I mean, I strongly object to the way Mark Miller was answering to all of that. I'm sure he didn't mean that what they were doing is garbage, but the way he said it makes them think that, oh, you think I'm garbage? That's not conducive to a peace treaty. But it was just the fact that they are almost committing their own death by, instead of focusing on the Conservatives and on the plan and on making, maybe after the strong showing of the Prime Minister last week at the Commission, and pinpointing Pierre Poilievre for not asking for security clearance and so on, so not ready to be in the big boy thing. Now they have to deal with that. So tomorrow he has to listen to them, say what you're hearing at the door. He hears it constantly. We all hear it from coast to coast to coast. It doesn't mean that we cannot win, because, and then you come back and you show that you have a plan. And we need to see, I think the Liberals will need to see a feisty Prime Minister, the boxer that everybody knows, so that they will get out of it and going a bit more rah-rah. You have the people who will still feel at the end of the day, nothing will satisfy them unless there was a Léger poll tomorrow showing the Liberals ahead by 15 points. So these people, and most of them are not running again, are not the people that he needs to convince, but they need to have the maximum players tomorrow that shows that are committed. I'm almost expecting a let's get out of the room, a big chunk of people, like they know how to manage the thing, have the women in front, just behind the Prime Minister, have a good chunk of people from the caucus, and to show some type of unity. And that should be the end of it. If he cannot make them understand that that has to stop, because it makes the joy of the media right now, because we're the only one talking about something we have no idea who's on this, who signed, whose names.
Yeah, okay.
We don't know.
I got to get to Emily. I mean, I have some idea, and Ken Hardy said today that he knows 18 MPs who have personally signed it. So for the people saying we're making this all up, ask the Liberal MPs. They know what's going on. So Emily, how do you think this is affecting things for the Liberals? How do you think the Prime Minister and the caucus will deal with this tomorrow?
So I also have some ideas of the argumentation that's going to be put forward tomorrow, or that people are thinking about. One of the things in terms of people supporting this effort is, first of all, I mean, we've heard it for a really long time. People feeling that the Prime Minister might have the right message, but isn't the right messenger, that when it's him, it doesn't come through anymore. But more importantly, I think that you might hear people who want to have Parliament being prorogued and go into a leadership race because they're really, really worried about the gap of money, essentially, campaign money between the Conservative and the Liberals, and how much advertising the Conservatives have been able to spend, and that to be able to match the Conservative in terms of even being able to campaign, a leadership race in terms of the attention that it garners, in terms of the support, in terms of donation, in terms of engagement, grassroots engagement from Liberal members, that would be, in their views, the only thing that would that would be able to basically match the Conservatives in terms of attention, and that in that sense, the journalistic attention on this, if the Prime Minister was to resign, it's a very risky bet. But it's the idea that attention would be the only thing that would be able to turn this ship around and actually give the Liberal as a party a fighting chance against the Conservative, given the gap in money that we're seeing now. And I think it's really important to also say this because we've been talking about a lot of things in terms of who would be better able to fight the Conservatives than Justin Trudeau, and there's all a matter of course, personality and whatnot. But it's also just that even to the fact that this debate could be had, some people are seeing this as actually a way to win.
Yeah, you're right on the advertising spending. This is something that Liberals have been anxious about for quite some time. And when I'm watching News Network, when I'm not on News Network, you see the Pierre Poilievre ads even on the CBC, right? Making his argument to voters. But Michelle, we know the demand. We want you to leave. Usually when you deliver an ultimatum to someone, or else is what you say next. And I know Ken McDonald said people have kind of discussed voting non-confidence, but there is no clear or else here. It's just some of us are going to tell you tomorrow, but we may not reveal who everybody is. And there's no, we're going to do a Chuck Strahl and a Deb Gray and sit as an independent caucus. There is no Reform Act adoption by the Liberals where they can collect signatures and force a secret ballot vote on the leadership, though I know this is something they're talking about requesting. If there's no or else, what can they hope to achieve?
Well, first of all, I think that you're right. If there's no or else, it's probably going to fall on deaf ears. And especially if there's only a few people that actually stand up and say anything. And if those people actually aren't running again anyways. The one card that MPs hold is the fact that, they are going to stand and put their name forward. If there was a mass group saying that they're not going to run, then, a very significant number, then that might mean something. But apart from that, triggering an election where you don't want the current leader to be your leader, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So they're in a bit of a quagmire. The one thing I'll just push back on in terms of the fundraising thing, leaderships are not great fundraising tools for parties, especially for parties going into an election campaign, because all of those candidates divvy up all of the money, and there's only so many people who are giving. And so it's a very diverse or dispersed kind of amount, and the party has a hard time itself raising money when all of these candidates are out there raising money for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's not a great thing.
It could energize, but you're right. It's a money drain, right? Potentially.
Sure,
it could
there
energize,
might be attention, but you know what? There's a whole bunch of attention on the party right now, right?
Yeah,
Just got to get the right kind of attention with the right kind of message. And perhaps, perhaps leadership race would do that.
Right.
But that it's not about being starved for attention in terms of the money issues. Right now, there has to be another shoe to drop, or else it might just end up being a constructive meeting tomorrow where people kind of voice their views and the Prime Minister listens and then hopefully responds. And we will know when we see the caucus outs who is speaking up. Is it the people? What I'm going to be looking for is it the MPs who are running again, who don't have caucus, who don't have cabinet positions right now or parliamentary secretary positions, but they just believe that their future is in running under the current Prime Minister.
Right. Okay, Kate, quick final thought on this, and I want to move on to the other topic.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the situation for the Liberals may not even change with a leadership race, right? Michelle makes a great point about fundraising. Leadership races are largely insular activities that happen, within a party. The other opposition parties, I would think, as soon as a new leader is named, would try to pull the plug on the government at the earliest opportunity and not give that runway. And when you consider that everybody in caucus has carbon tax baggage, Mark Carney certainly has carbon tax baggage, Christy Clark has carbon tax baggage, there's no alternative that is, proposing a different solution on that policy, which I think has played a role in a lot of the provincial election outcomes that we've seen. There's no clear alternative to the current crop of Liberals that we see.
No, and Sean Casey made this point last week that changing leader potentially lowers the floor, potentially raises the ceiling. But you look at what happened in BC with all of that and where the Conservatives ended up, change creates volatility.